Eva used to be the kind of woman who lit up every room she entered. Her laughter was contagious, her dreams were big, and the future felt full of endless possibilities. Somewhere along the way, life chipped away at her sparkle, slowly, quietly, till one day she realized she had become invisible in her own story. For years, Eva gave everything she had to her family. She traded her own dreams for bedtime stories, soccer games, packed lunches, and late-night hospital runs. She swallowed her own needs, thinking, maybe tomorrow I'll get to myself. But tomorrow never came. It was always about someone else, her husband, her children, their dreams, their problems. Hers didn't seem to matter anymore. Now sitting alone in a too quiet house, Eva feels the weight of years pressing down on her shoulders. The silence is deafening. It's not just loneliness. It's like she's trapped in a life she no longer recognizes. A life where she has become a background character, forgotten even by the people she once put above everything else. Her son Lucas, once her little boy who clung to her hand in crowded malls, now barely calls. Conversations are rushed, distracted, full of excuses. Busy, Mom. Maybe next week. Her daughter, Sophie, carries a different kind of distance. Older, sharper. There's a wall between them that Eva can't seem to climb, no matter how hard she tries. Every interaction feels strained, like a polite stranger crossing paths instead of a bond between mother and daughter. Eva battles herself every day. Part of her whispers, "This is just life. This is normal. You should be grateful." But another part, the part she's pushed down for too long, is beginning to stir. It's tired of the excuses, tired of the silence, tired of living in the shadows of everyone else's life. Somewhere deep inside, Eva still remembers the girl she used to be. The girl who loved painting, who wanted to open her own little art gallery, who dreamed of seeing the world. That girl didn't disappear. She just got buried under years of being mom and wife and helper. Now, as Eva sits with her own emptiness, something inside her begins to whisper louder. You deserve more. You were meant for more. The realization hits her hard. She's not just lonely. She's lost. Lost to the life she built for everyone else. And for the first time in a very long time, any spark flickers inside her. Longing. Need. Fight she thought was long gone. Eva doesn't know how or when, but deep down, she knows one thing for sure. She can't keep living like this. Something has to change. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. The kind of day Eva had grown used to. Slow, heavy, filled with the quiet hum of loneliness. She was folding laundry when her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A sound so rare, these days it almost startled her. She wiped her hands on a towel and picked it up, expecting a reminder, a bill, maybe another spam message. But what she saw stopped her cold. It was from Lucas, the son who barely texted unless there was a birthday or some quick update. The message was short, barely a sentence. Can we meet soon? I've been thinking about you. Eva's breath caught in her chest. For a long moment, she just stared at the screen, her heart hammering against her ribs. She read it again, and again. The words were simple, almost casual, but to her, they felt like a lifeline thrown into deep water she had been drowning in for months, maybe even years. A lump rose in her throat. Part of her wanted to believe this was it. The moment everything would change, that the distance between them could finally be bridged. But another part of her, the bruised, cautious part, whispered, "Don't get your hopes up. Don't expect too much." Because Eva knew this wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't some heartfelt confession or a promise to make things right. It was quieter than that. A small crack in the wall Lucas had built. A quiet, trembling hand reaching out into the darkness. Still, it was something. For a heart that had been starving for any sign that she still mattered, it was everything. Eva sat down at the kitchen table, half-folded laundry forgotten. Her fingers hovered over the screen, unsure how to respond. Of course. When? I miss you too. I've been thinking about you every day. So many words filled her mind, but none seemed enough. She didn't want to scare him away with too much emotion, but she also didn't want to pretend this wasn't a big deal to her, because it was. It was huge. Finally, she typed back, I'd love to. Just tell me when. She pressed send before she could overthink it, then set the phone down carefully, almost reverently, as if it were made of glass. And then she sat there, staring at the space in front of her, trying to calm the flood of emotions rushing through her. Hope, fear, longing, sadness for all the wasted time. Fragile, aching hope that maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to fix what had been broken. This message wasn't just about meeting for coffee or dinner. It was an opening. A door she thought had been slammed shut forever was now cracked open, just enough for a sliver of light to pour through. But it also forced her to confront something she had been avoiding, the reality of how broken things had become. How long she had lived pretending that distance was normal, that silence was expected, that this was just how life worked as children grew older. Lucas's message was a reminder that pretending hadn't healed anything. It had only deepened the wounds, and now, standing on the edge of what could be a new beginning, Eva made a silent promise to herself. If life was giving her even the smallest chance to reconnect, she wouldn't run from it this time. She would walk through that door, no matter how scared she was. The night before she was supposed to meet Lucas, Eva couldn't sleep. She sat at the edge of her bed, the room bathed in the soft, pale light of the street lamp outside. It was quiet, the kind of stillness that left too much space for old memories to creep in, one by one. They played in her mind like an old film. The sound of Lucas's laughter as a little boy when she pushed him on the swings. The way he used to cling to her hand in crowded places. The long nights she stayed awake, worrying when he was sick, studying late, or out too long with friends. Every sacrifice she had made, every dream she had quietly folded and tucked away, was for him, for the family. And yet here she was, alone, wondering when exactly the distance had crept in between them. Had it been during those rocky teenage years, when every conversation turned into a battle? Or had it started even earlier, in those tiny moments she brushed aside her own needs, thinking, it's not important. He needs me more. The pain wasn't sharp tonight. It was dull, heavy, a familiar ache she had learned to live with. Preparing to meet Lucas wasn't just about choosing what to wear or planning what to say. It was about standing face to face with the years that had slipped away. Years filled with silent birthdays, missed phone calls, conversations that stayed shallow to avoid touching the deeper wounds. Eva wrestled with two sides of herself. One side, hurt and tired, whispered, why now? After all this time, why now? The anger simmered beneath the surface, tempting her to keep her guard up, to protect the fragile heart she had stitched back together piece by piece. Another side, softer, braver, spoke louder. Maybe this is the moment you've been waiting for. Maybe it's time to let go of the old pain so you can make space for something new. It was terrifying, because reaching out meant risking disappointment again. It meant opening wounds that had barely scabbed over. It meant being vulnerable in a way Eva hadn't allowed herself to be in years. She pulled out an old photo album from the bottom of her closet, dust covering its faded blue cover. As she turned the pages, she saw snapshots of birthdays, family vacations, messy homemade cakes, Halloween costumes stitched by hand. In every picture, her smile was bright, but her eyes told another story. One of exhaustion, of a woman crying, so hard to hold everything together. She traced her finger over Lucas's face in a Christmas photo, where he grinned at the camera, arms thrown around her neck. How had they gotten so far from that moment? Tears blurred her vision, but she let them fall. Not because she was weak, but because she was finally strong enough to feel it all. At the time the sun began to rise, painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges, Eva understood something. The meeting with Lucas wasn't just about seeing him again. It was about seeing herself again. It was about finding the courage to be honest, about the pain, the love, the mistakes, and the hope she still held tightly in her hands. She would not go into this meeting pretending everything was fine. She would not bury her feelings under layers of politeness and fear. For the first time in a long time, Eva was ready to speak. Not with anger, but with truth. Not to blame, but to heal. Whatever happened when she sat across from Lucas, whether it was a new beginning or just a moment of closure, she would walk into it fully as herself. Broken, yes, but not defeated. Hopeful, but grounded in the hard-won knowledge that she deserved to be heard, to be seen, to be loved. Not for what she could give, but simply for who she was. The park was quiet, the early afternoon sun filtering through, the tall trees casting soft golden patches over the walking paths. A few people strolled by, lost in their own worlds, but to Eva, it felt like the whole universe had narrowed down to this one bench, this one moment. Lucas was already there when she arrived, sitting stiffly, hands clasped together between his knees. He looked up when he saw her. The same boyish face she remembered, but older now, harder to read. His nervous smile faltered before it even fully appeared. Eva's heart thudded painfully, but she forced herself to walk toward him with steady steps. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly, standing up as if unsure whether to hug her. "Hi, Lucas," she replied, her voice calm but thick with unspoken emotions. They sat down side by side, the distance between them feeling much larger than just a few inches of wooden bench. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sounds of children playing in the distance and a dog barking somewhere filled the silence between them. Eva inhaled deeply, gathering the words she had carried in her heart for far too long. "I got your message," she said finally, her voice soft. "It surprised me." Lucas nodded, staring at his hands. I didn't know how to start. I've been thinking a lot lately, about everything." Eva waited. She wasn't here to rescue the conversation, to fill the gaps like she had always done before. Lucas needed to find his own way across this bridge. "I know I haven't been good at staying close," he said, struggling. "I guess I didn't realize how far we drifted until it was too late." Eva turned to look at him, really look at him. There was no anger in his face, only confusion, pain, and something that looked very much like regret. "You were busy living your life," she said, her tone even. "It's what you're supposed to do." "But it's not an excuse," Lucas said quickly, the words spilling out now. "I should have been there, especially after Dad left, especially after everything." Eva swallowed hard. It would be so easy to let old bitterness color her words, to pour out the years of hurt. But that wasn't why she was here. "I won't lie to you," she said, voice steady. "It hurt. It still does sometimes." Lucas's shoulders sagged as if the weight of her words physically pressed down on him. "I also understand," Eva continued. "I spent so many years putting everyone else first. Maybe I taught you that I didn't need anything back. Maybe I made it too easy to forget that I'm human, too." Lucas's eyes glistened. He wiped at them quickly, embarrassed. "I don't know how to fix it," he said hoarsely. "But I want to try, if you'll let me." For the first time in a long while, Eva felt something inside her loosen, a knot of expectation. and resentment she hadn't even realized she was still carrying. She smiled gently, the kind of smile that carried both sadness and hope. "You don't have to fix anything," she said. "Just being honest is enough. I'm not waiting for anyone to make me feel whole anymore. My job now." Lucas let out a shaky breath, part relief, part sadness. They sat there for a while longer, talking about little things, memories they still shared, dreams they had yet to chase. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a magic moment that made everything okay, but it was real. And for Eva, that was more powerful than any apology could ever be. As they stood to leave, Lucas hesitated, then reached out and hugged her. Tight, genuine hug that spoke volumes. Eva closed her eyes and let herself feel it, not as a desperate grasp for the past, but as a quiet promise for whatever the future might hold. She walked away from that meeting lighter, freer, because for the first time in a long time, Eva understood. Her peace was never going to come from someone else's validation. It was something she had to give herself. And today she had taken the first real step. The meeting with Lucas left Eva feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Seen. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough to awaken something inside her that had been sleeping for far too long. For so many years, Eva's life had revolved around others, around being the mother, the caretaker, the fixer. She had measured her worth by how much she could give, how much she could endure. But walking away from that park bench, something inside her whispered a new truth. She was more than what she could do for others. It started small. One rainy afternoon, Eva wandered into the dusty storage closet where her old canvas and paints had been tucked away years ago. The sight of them, the cracked paint boobs, the stiff brushes, made her heart ache in a way that was both sad and sweet. With trembling hands, she pulled everything out and set it up by the kitchen window, where the light was soft and perfect. At first, her strokes were hesitant, unsure, like relearning the language of color and emotion. But as the hours passed, she found herself lost in it, the same way she once had before life's demands pulled her away. Painting wasn't just a hobby, it was a quiet rebellion, a way of saying, "I matter too." Eva's transformation didn't stop there. Sophie called, full of complaints and demands, treating Eva more like an obligation than a person. Something new stirred inside her. For the first time, Eva didn't immediately jump to please her. Instead, she spoke with calm firmness. "I love you, Sophie, but I'm learning to take care of myself too." The silence on the other end of the phone was deafening, terrifying, but also liberating. Eva realized that loving her children didn't mean losing herself. She also began venturing out, visiting a local art group that met once a week in a cozy little cafe downtown. The first time she walked through those doors, she almost turned back, nerves pressing down on her chest. But then she reminded herself she deserved joy, friendship, and new beginnings. At the art group, no one saw her as just a mother or someone's wife. They saw Eva, the woman who loved deep colors, who laughed at silly jokes, who had dreams of her own. Little by little, brick by brick, Eva began building a life that felt like hers. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, steady, and real. For the first time in decades, Eva wasn't living in the shadow of who she used to be. She was stepping into the light of who she was becoming. And even though she still had scars from the past, she wore them with pride, as proof that she had survived, and that she was finally, truly living for herself. Greenwich Village always had a charm of its own. Cozy cafes tucked between old buildings, streets humming with life, and corners that seemed to whisper forgotten dreams. It was on one such afternoon that Eva stumbled across Daniel's bookstore. From the outside, it didn't look like much. A small place with a faded green door, handwritten signs in the window. But the moment Ava stepped inside, she felt it, a deep, settling sense of peace. The walls were lined with towering shelves, heavy with books that smelled of time and stories. Soft jazz played in the background. There was a fireplace at the back, with a few worn leather chairs gathered around it. It wasn't just a shop, it was a sanctuary. And Daniel, the owner, matched the place perfectly. He wasn't loud or showy. He was calm, thoughtful, with kind eyes that seemed to really see people. When he welcomed Eva, it wasn't in that rushed, distracted way she had gotten used to. It was genuine, like she was someone worth noticing. At first, their conversations were casual, books, favorite authors, little jokes about the weather. But as days turned into weeks, something deeper began to take root. Daniel never pushed. Izzy never asked for more than Eva was willing to give. Instead, he offered her something she hadn't realized she needed: safe space. A space where she didn't have to be perfect or strong or endlessly giving. A space where she could just be. Sometimes they would sit in silence by the fire, both reading their own books, the world outside fading into nothingness. Other times, they would talk for hours about art, about dreams, about regrets, their words weaving a quiet tapestry of understanding between them. There was no rush, no expectation, no pressure to be anything other than exactly who she was. Daniel never treated Eva like a broken woman, treated her like a whole person who had simply been carrying too much for too long. And slowly, Eva began to shed the heavy layers she had worn for years. The guilt, the self-doubt, the need to earn love through sacrifice. In Daniel's presence, Eva remembered the parts of herself that had been buried. The curious girl who loved poetry, the passionate artist who once dreamed of seeing the world, the woman who deserved kindness without having to beg for it. Their bond wasn't about romance in the traditional sense. It was about trust, about healing, about the quiet, powerful reminder that sometimes the right people don't rescue you. They simply sit beside you and remind you that you're worth saving. In the warm glow of that little bookstore, surrounded by the smell of old paper and fresh coffee, Eva found something she hadn't dared to hope for: a new beginning. This time, it was hers to write. The house on Willow Lane stood still under a gray Brooklyn sky. Eva paused at the front gate, heart heavy, fingers brushing against the rusted latch. This house, this place, had once been her entire world. She stepped inside, the door creaking softly as it opened, the smell of old wood and faint memories wrapped around her. It was strange. A place so full of life feels so unbearably empty now. The living room was the first to greet her. The worn-out sofa where Lucas and Sophie once curled up for movie nights. The scratched coffee table covered in years of forgotten conversations. Even the crooked picture frames on the wall seemed frozen in time, whispering stories Eva wasn't ready to hear. She moved slowly from room to room, each step pulling memories from the shadows. The kitchen, where she cooked endless meals no one thanked her for. The dining room, where birthdays were celebrated but gratitude was often missing. The staircase, where late-night arguments echoed into sleepless nights. Everywhere she looked, Eva saw pieces of herself. The woman who stayed silent when she should have spoken. The mother who gave when she had nothing left to give. The wife who sacrificed her dreams, believing love was something you earned by shrinking yourself. Standing in what used to be Sophie's room, Eva let her hand trail across the edge of the empty dresser. She remembered the nights spent sewing costumes, the mornings spent rushing through chaotic breakfasts. And in that silence, the truth hit her harder than she expected. Her sacrifices, her sleepless nights, her endless giving, most of it had gone unseen, unappreciated, taken for granted, but instead of anger, Eva felt something else rising within her. Soft, aching acceptance. It wasn't that her love had been wasted. It was that she had given it without giving any to herself. She walked into her old bedroom last, the place where dreams once lived, tucked away behind responsibilities. She stood by the window, watching the wind stir the brittle autumn leaves. Eva realized she couldn't rewrite the past. She couldn't change the choices she made or the people she loved. But she could decide, right here, right now, stop letting it define her. The past wasn't something she needed to carry anymore. It wasn't a chain around her heart. It was simply what it was. It was time to let it go. She sat on the edge of the bed for a moment longer, breathing in the stillness. There were no grand gestures, no tears. Just a quiet goodbye to the woman she had been, the woman who believed she had to disappear to matter. Before leaving, Eva took one last walk through the house. She touched the walls, whispered a silent thank you to the life that had shaped her, and closed the door gently behind her. As she stepped outside, the cool air kissed her skin. Heavy weight she had carried for so long lifted little by little. Brooklyn's streets buzzed with distant life as Eva walked away from the house. Not with regret, but with a strange, beautiful sense of freedom. The past would always be a part of her story, but it would no longer be her prison. She was free now, finally free to choose herself. The sale of the house felt like a release. A weight lifted from Eva's shoulders, one she didn't even realize she had been carrying. As the final papers were signed and the last box was packed, the family home, with its history and memories, was no longer hers to hold. It was time for something new, something hers. She stood in the empty house one last time, gazing at the bare walls. It had been filled with laughter, arguments, love, and pain. But now it was silent. The walls that once trapped her were now empty of expectations and obligations. Eva could finally exhale. For so long, she had felt that her identity was tied to that house, to the life she had built there. The roles she played, mother, wife, caretaker, were all wrapped in those walls, and leaving them behind felt like stepping into the unknown. But instead of fear, there was a sense of excitement. The money from the sale wasn't a fortune, but it symbolized something far more important: freedom. With the sale came the freedom to finally take control of her life, to travel without feeling guilty, to spend her time learning things that made her soul come alive, and to pursue a future where she wasn't defined by others' needs or expectations. She felt a shift inside herself, an unfamiliar but welcome shift. She was living for herself now. She could breathe deeply, no longer suffocating under the weight of the past. For the first time in years, Eva was in charge of her own story. Eva took a trip, just a weekend at a small cabin in the woods, tucked, away from the world. It was simple, but it was hers. She didn't have to take care of anyone, didn't have to think about schedules or check in with anyone. It was a quiet time to reflect, to think, and to listen to the rhythm of her own thoughts. During that weekend, Eva rediscovered her love for art. She picked up a paintbrush and started sketching the world around her. The tall trees, the wide, open sky, the way the light danced on the water. For years she had abandoned this passion, convinced that she had no time for such indulgence. But now, it felt like a gift she had given herself, and it brought a peace she hadn't expected. She signed up for a painting class when she returned to the city, and in that space, she found herself growing in ways she never imagined. She met people who valued her for who she was, not for what she could give them. She found a community that supported her, not because she was a mother, but because she was Eva, a woman with dreams, with purpose, and with a story of her own, as Eva started focusing on herself. She realized she wasn't just rebuilding her life. She was creating a new version of herself, one that didn't need approval from anyone else to feel worthy. The life she had once dreamed of was finally within reach, and now it wasn't a dream. It was real. She didn't need the approval of her children or anyone else to validate her choices. She had learned that true peace comes from within, not from external sources. Eva had found a deep sense of fulfillment, not in others, but in her own existence. She had become the author of her own life. This was the final step towards peace, not just in accepting what had been lost, but in embracing everything she could now create. Past was still a part of her, but it no longer defined her. She had learned to let go of the weight, to forgive herself, and to move forward with hope. Eva's future wasn't just something that was happening to her anymore. She had taken the reins, and it was hers to shape. And with that newfound control, Eva was finally able to live the life she had always dreamed of, on her own terms. The park was quiet, the kind of peaceful place where time seemed to slow down. Eva stood on the edge of the small pond, the cool breeze brushing her hair as she waited for Lucas to arrive. Her heart was a mix of nerves and anticipation, the last chapter of their fractured relationship ready to be written. She had seen Lucas grow into an adult, but the echoes of their past still haunted her, and she knew this meeting would be the final step toward healing. When Lucas approached, there was no rush, no hurry. His eyes met hers, and for the first time in years, there was no wall between them. He wasn't the angry, confused boy who had left. This was a man seeking the closure they both desperately needed. "I'm sorry, Mom," Lucas started, his voice soft but filled with sincerity. There was no anger in his words, no defensiveness, just raw honesty. "I know I wasn't there for you, and I know how much that hurt." Eva didn't say anything at first. She simply listened. Her heart, once full of bitterness, now felt surprisingly light. She had waited for this moment, but now that it was here, she realized she didn't need to say all the things she had rehearsed in her mind. Instead, she nodded, acknowledging the apology that came from a place of understanding. "I didn't make it easy for you," she said after a beat, her voice calm. There was no rage, no judgment, just the truth between them. "I wanted you to be everything I couldn't be. I pushed you away without even realizing it." Lucas sat beside her, on the bench, his hands fidgeting, as though unsure of how to express the flood of emotions running through him. "I know, Mom. I should have been there. You always did everything for me, for Sophie, for all of us. And I didn't see it. I just didn't see you." There it was, the truth that both of them had been avoiding for so long. The guilt, the confusion, the sense of abandonment, all wrapped up in the unsaid words between them. But today, they were finally being said. Eva took a deep breath, her chest heavy with emotion. "I don't need your apologies, Lucas. I just needed you to see me. And now I'm learning to see myself." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. "This isn't about holding grudges anymore. It's about understanding. The past is still part of us, but it doesn't have to hold us back." Lucas looked at her, his expression a mix of relief and sadness. "I want to be a part of your life, Mom. I do. I just didn't know how to come back from all the years of silence." Eva reached out, placing a hand on his. "You've already come back, Lucas. We've both been lost for too long. But I'm here now, and I'm learning to heal." She smiled, not out of pity or sympathy, but out of a genuine sense of peace. "And you don't have to fix everything. We just need to move forward." For the first time in years, they were on the same page. The hurt was still there, but so was the possibility of healing. Eva understood now that this moment wasn't about erasing the pain. It was about acknowledging it, accepting it, and moving forward together. Lucas nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, Lucas," Ava whispered back, her voice thick with emotion. "Now let's start over." This was the final confrontation. Not about blame, not about guilt, but about understanding. And in this moment of healing, Eva could finally release the last of the old wounds and step into a new chapter, free of the past shadow. Eva stood before the full-length mirror, her reflection unfamiliar yet completely her own. The years of giving, sacrificing, and bending to the needs of others had left their mark, but today she saw herself with new eyes. She no longer looked at the face in the mirror with regret, or with longing for approval she had never received. For the first time in a long time, she saw someone strong, someone whole, someone worthy of love and respect, and that love came from within. The past few months had been transformative. From the time of the sale of the family home to the emotional conversations with Lucas, Eva had been rediscovering who she was beneath the roles that had defined her for so long. The realization was powerful, almost overwhelming. She had spent her entire life defining herself by others. As a mother, as a wife, she had always been secondary to the needs and desires of everyone else. But now, as she stood alone in this moment, she finally understood. She no longer needed anyone's validation to feel complete. In the quiet of her small apartment in Greenwich Village, Eva could finally breathe. She had traded the suffocating weight of others' expectations for the freedom of self-acceptance. Her mind wasn't clouded with the guilt of past decisions or the fear of what others thought. She had let go of the need to please, the endless striving for a love she had never received, and she had replaced it with something far more empowering, the love she had neglected to give herself. Eva took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment of stillness. The sense of peace that settled over her was profound. For years, she had been seeking approval from her children, from her ex-husband, from her friends, always hoping that validation would somehow fill the emptiness inside. But now, she realized that all along, she had been the only one who could truly fill that space. The emptiness wasn't something that could be healed by others. It was something she had to mend herself. She thought back to the conversations she had had with Daniel, the bookstore owner who had become a quiet pillar in her life. He had never demanded anything from her, had never pushed her to be anything other than herself. With Daniel, Eva had learned that real connection wasn't about validation. It was about being seen for who you truly were, flaws, fears, dreams, and all. Daniel had given her the space to be imperfect, and in doing so, had helped her begin to reclaim her identity. As she looked around her apartment, Eva saw the pieces of her new life taking shape. Her walls, once bare and cold, were now filled with artwork she had painted. The first step in rediscovering the woman she had once been. The journals on her desk, filled with thoughts and reflections, were proof of the emotional work she had been doing. Each word, each brush stroke, represented a piece of herself that she had reclaimed. In these quiet moments, Eva realized how far she had come. She had been so consumed by the roles of wife and mother that she had neglected the woman she had once been, the woman who dreamed, who created, who longed to be seen for who she was. But now, she wasn't just seeing herself. She was finally allowing herself to be seen. She was allowing herself to live for her own happiness, her own fulfillment. Eva was no longer the woman who waited for others to fill the void inside her. She was no longer defined by the failures of the past or the expectations of others. She was a woman who had learned to fill herself up, emotionally, creatively, and spiritually. She had reclaimed her identity, and with it, her freedom. With a smile, Eva turned away from the mirror. She was no longer looking for answers from others, nor did she need them. She was free to live her life, to make her own decisions, to be her own source of validation. The clarity that had once seemed so elusive was now within reach, and it came from the understanding that she didn't need anyone's approval to be whole. She was whole, and that was enough. The small brass key in Eva's palm felt heavier than it should. It wasn't just a key to a bookstore section. It was a key to a new life, a life she had only begun to understand. Daniel had given it to her that morning as they stood in the doorway of his beloved bookstore, the scent of old pages and coffee filling the air. She had been coming to his shop for months now, finding refuge in its quiet corners, in its welcoming chaos of bookshelves that towered over her like silent witnesses to her transformation. But this key was more than just a way to enter a room. It was a symbol of trust, of growth, and of a future she had begun to carve out for herself. Daniel, always patient and kind, had seen her struggles before anyone else. He understood the quiet power of being seen without expectation. She had come to him broken, uncertain, and unsure of what her next step should be. But in his presence, she had found something rare. Peace. In his conversations, in the stillness of his bookstore, she had begun to understand what it meant to be truly free, to not have to prove herself to anyone, to no longer carry the weight of others' judgment. "You've earned this," Daniel had said, his eyes sincere as he handed her the key. "This is for you, Eva, a place for you to grow." Eva had looked at him, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. It was so simple, so unassuming, yet it represented everything she had been seeking for so long. The bookstore had already become a sanctuary for her, but this was something else entirely. This key, this small gesture, was his way of saying that he believed in her, that she could take ownership of her own future, that she could create something new, something entirely hers. For the first time in her life, Eva felt like she wasn't walking someone else's path. The weight of the past, of her children's expectations, of a life lived for others, was finally lifting. She was free to walk her own path now, and Daniel had given her the first step forward. Later that afternoon, Eva found herself standing at the door of the new section of the bookstore, the key warm in her hand. She had never seen this part of the shop before. It was tucked away in a quiet corner, hidden behind a bookshelf that had been moved to make room for it. The room was small, intimate, with large windows that let in the soft afternoon light, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with titles she had never seen before, each one waiting to be explored. Eva stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. The room felt like a secret, a space she had carved out for herself, a space that was all her own. She placed the key in the lock, turning it gently, and pushed the door open. The sound of the door creaking as it opened felt like the start of something new, a new chapter, a new beginning. She walked inside, her heart beating a little faster. The room was cozy, warm and inviting, the scent of old books mingling with the faint trace of coffee from the shop below. Eva ran her fingers along the spines of the books, feeling a connection to the words that lined the shelves. These weren't just books. They were stories waiting to be discovered, ideas that would stir her soul and spark her creativity. She wasn't just in a bookstore anymore. She was in a space that held the potential for everything she wanted to become. As Eva stood there, she realized that this room, this small corner of the world, was a reflection of her journey. It was a blank canvas, full of possibility. It was a space where she could be herself, free from the roles she had played for so long. She could now take the time to write her own story, to fill the pages with the things that truly mattered to her. There was no more self-doubt, no more looking to others for approval. In this room, Eva could be who she had always wanted to be, someone whole, someone real. The key that had seemed so small just hours before now felt monumental. This was the moment when everything changed for Eva. She wasn't just living for others anymore, she was living for herself. And for the first time, it felt right. Daniel's gift was the catalyst for her new life, a life she could embrace fully without fear or hesitation. It wasn't about the bookstore, or the key, or the quiet room. It was about the freedom it symbolized. Freedom to make choices for herself. Freedom to explore, to create, and to grow. Eva stood there for a long while, savoring the stillness of the room. The world outside might have been chaotic, but in this space, she was at peace. For the first time in years, she felt grounded. She was no longer just a mother, a wife, a caretaker. She was Eva, and she was enough. With a deep breath, Eva smiled. She closed the door behind her and slipped the key into her pocket, knowing that she had unlocked something far greater than just a room. She had unlocked her future, and it was hers to shape, one step at a time. Eva stood at the window of her small apartment in Greenwich Village, gazing out at the city's skyline as the sun began to set. The sky was painted in hues of orange and pink, a beautiful contrast to the busy streets below. In this quiet moment, she realized that for the first time in her life, she felt completely at peace. The journey she had undertaken, from the woman who had sacrificed so much of herself for the sake of others, to the woman standing here now, had been long, painful, and transformative. But with each passing day, she had shed the layers of guilt, resentment, and self-doubt that once defined her. The emotional weight she had carried for years, the burden of unspoken words and unmet expectations, was finally gone. Eva had stopped, living in the shadow of those around her. She no longer felt the need to please anyone, to be what they wanted her to be. Her life was her own now. She had learned to embrace her worth without needing anyone's validation, and the freedom that came with that realization was liberating. She thought of Daniel, whose quiet support had been a steady anchor during this journey. His belief in her had been a constant reminder that she was worthy of happiness and fulfillment. It wasn't his love that had transformed her, but his respect for her autonomy, her voice, and her choices. Eva had learned from him that love didn't have to come with strings attached, that it could be simply a mutual appreciation for who the other person truly was. But it wasn't just Daniel who had shown her the way. The healing with Lucas, the final acceptance of what had been lost in the past, had allowed her to forgive herself. For so long, she had felt like a failure as a mother, a woman who had given everything only to be left feeling invisible. But Lucas's acknowledgement, his willingness to understand the pain he had caused, had been a balm to her soul. In that moment, she understood that forgiveness, for both herself and for others, was the final piece of her healing. Her thoughts drifted to the bookstore, to the small section she had claimed as her own, a space where she could explore, grow, and create. It was more than just a room. It was a symbol of everything she had worked for, a reminder that she could still build a future on her terms. Eva exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the past fall away. She had nothing left to prove, no more apologies to make, no more expectations to meet. What remained was her, a woman who had rediscovered her strength, her voice, and her peace. As the last light of the day faded into night, Eva smiled. She had come a long way, but the road ahead was filled with endless possibilities. She was no longer defined by the past or the roles she had played. She was free. And in this freedom, she found a deep sense of fulfillment, peace that came from within. Eva stood in front of the large windows in her living room, a soft breeze flowing through the open curtains, carrying with it the scent of fresh rain. She had come so far, and in her newfound peace, she realized there was something she still needed to do, something that would fully complete her journey of self-reclamation. She had spent her life giving to others, often at the expense of herself. And now it was time to give in a way that reflected her growth. Not out of obligation, but out of love. The decision came to her quietly, almost as an instinct. She had always believed in the power of kindness, in the power of lifting up those who had been left behind. Over the past few months, Eva had met so many women who, like her, had spent years living in the shadows of others' expectations, sacrificing their dreams and desires to meet the needs of everyone else. Many of these women had been overlooked, their voices silenced, their potential stifled. Eva had once been one of them, a woman who had given so much of herself without asking for anything in return. But through her own journey of healing, she realized the importance of self-love, of honoring her own worth, and of taking action to make a positive difference in the world. And so, she decided to take a step forward, not just for herself, but for other women who had lived their lives in the shadows. She made a call to a women's foundation that supported women's empowerment and equality. The foundation focused on helping women break free from cycles of self-sacrifice, teaching them to reclaim their identities, build their own futures, and find their voices. Eva knew that this was where she needed to place her energy. This was where her growth and her newfound peace could have the most meaningful impact. The act of donating felt different from anything she had done before. It wasn't a sacrifice. It wasn't something she was doing out of guilt or obligation. It was an offering from a place of strength, from a desire to make a positive impact in the world. As she wrote the check, she reflected on how far she had come. She had stopped trying to please everyone around her, stopped giving of herself until she had nothing left. She had learned to give in a way that nourished her soul. For the first time, the act of giving was not about what she lacked, but about what she had gained, the wisdom, the understanding, and the ability to help others walk the paths she had walked. The donation symbolized her growth. It was an acknowledgement that she no longer needed to be defined by what others expected of her. She could now define her own life, and part of that definition was her desire to help others find their strength too. Eva smiled softly as she sealed the envelope, her heart light with fulfillment. It wasn't just the donation that felt significant, but the intention behind it. She wasn't seeking recognition. She wasn't doing it to prove anything. It was simply her way of saying, "I see you," to the women who had been in her shoes, to the women who had given up parts of themselves for the sake of others. It was her way of showing that there was hope, that there was a way out of the shadows. The donation felt like a closing chapter, but also the opening of a new one. It was a final act of reconciliation with her past, a way of turning her pain into something beautiful. Eva had learned the importance of honoring herself, and now she could extend that love to others. The foundation would use her donation to help other women rediscover their worth, to give them the tools they needed to rebuild their lives. It was a simple gesture, but it carried with it all the weight of her journey, all the lessons she had learned about self-worth, self-love, and the power of giving. In that moment, Eva felt a deep sense of peace wash over her. She had found her voice. She had reclaimed her life. And now, she was helping others do the same. With each step she took toward her own healing, she was making the world a little brighter, one woman at a time. Eva stood at the entrance of the new section in Daniel's bookstore, the key to this new chapter in her hand, its weight symbolizing the journey she had traveled. The store, a cozy, intimate space filled with the comforting scent of old books, was quiet, save for the soft hum of the city outside. The wooden floors creaked underfoot, and soft light poured through the large front windows, casting a warm glow on the bookshelves that lined the walls, filled with stories of transformation, journeys and self-discovery, stories that mirrored her own. This new section of the bookstore had become a haven, a sanctuary, not only for those seeking knowledge, but also for Eva. It was more than just a physical space. It was a manifestation of everything she had learned about herself over the past few months. When she first walked into Daniel's bookstore, it had been an escape, a place of solace where she could find peace and start to heal. Now, standing in the new space, she felt that peace settle deep within her. This was no longer just a place of refuge. It was a symbol of her growth, a testament to the woman she had become. The key she held in her hand was no longer just a token of her connection to Daniel's world. It was a key to her own future, to a life she had never fully allowed herself to imagine. As her fingers closed around the cool metal, she felt the weight of her decisions, the weight of her new life resting within her palm. The door in front of her wasn't just a threshold to a physical room. It was the threshold to everything she had worked for, a life defined by her own choices, a life in which she would no longer bend under the expectations of others. With a deep breath, Eva turned the key in the lock. The soft click echoed in the silence, a sound that felt as though it resonated within her own chest. She pushed open the door slowly, taking in the sight of the space beyond. The new section of the bookstore was bright, airy, and inviting. The walls were adorned with inspiring quotes from authors and thinkers who had changed the world, each a quote a reminder of the power of words and ideas. In the center of the room stood a large wooden table surrounded by comfortable chairs, a perfect space for conversations, reflection, and growth. This was her space now, a space she had helped create, a space that reflected her emotional transformation. She could feel the weight of her past lifting with each step she took into the room, as though the very air had shifted, carrying with it the remnants of her old life. This was no longer the woman who had lived in the shadows of others, who had been weighed down by guilt and self-doubt. This was the woman who had reclaimed her power, who had found her voice, and who had learned to give to herself before giving to others. As Eva stepped further into the room, she felt a sense of calm wash over her. She ran her fingers along the edge of a book on one of the shelves, its cover familiar yet new, like the woman she had become. She could feel Daniel's presence behind her, his quiet encouragement, a steady foundation that had allowed her to grow into this new version of herself. But even without him here, she knew that this was her moment. This was her time. Eva turned around, gazing at the room she had stepped into, the new life that awaited her. She had come so far from the woman who once felt lost in the shadows. Now she was standing in the light, strong and confident, ready to embrace whatever came next. With a quiet smile, she closed her eyes for a moment, savoring the peace that filled her heart. She had faced her past, reconciled with her mistakes, and embraced the present. Now she was ready to move forward, to step into a future of her own, making a future that was full of promise and possibility. When Eva opened her eyes again, she knew without a doubt that this was just the beginning. This was her new door, a door to a future where she would live on her own terms, a future where she would continue to grow, to heal, and to thrive. And as she turned back to look at the key in her hand, she realized that she wasn't just holding the key to a door. She was holding the key to her own future, one that was wide open and waiting for her to step through with confidence, grace, and a heart full of possibilities.